Two Rivers Talks is brought to you by Two Rivers Biz Starts. Also by Two Rivers Main Street. And by Raleigh Point Economic Advising. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
More from the locals. Welcome back to the show. You're listening to Playtime with Bill Kerri. And you know what? I forgot to do this.
What'd you forget to do? Oh.
Happy birthday, Carrie Kendall.
Embarrass me.
Three days late.
Thank you.
But I don't see you during the week, so I needed to.
Ooh, a hamsa.
Oh, I don't know how that got in there. You're supposed to get that.
For blessing to protection.
Anna had a really fun time picking out everything.
I bet she did. This looks gorgeous. I want to do this right here, right now.
Well then, okay.
Okay.
Well, we'll do it later.
Spot, though. I appreciate it. It's gorgeous.
She knows you.
I know she does. She knows me so well.
She loves you dearly, and she's listening right now.
Hi, Anna.
At least I hope she is. She might be.
She probably turned us off a long time ago.
In the meantime, we're coming to you live from Two Rivers, Wisconsin, and Basil Ishkabible's art gallery and artist share space. Our little Claire, it's always so good to see you.
It's always good to see you too, and I want to say thank you for the both of you coming all the way up from Chicago to do this.
You guys,
fantastic.
I mean, you guys just welcomed us like family. I'm just speechless about how wonderful it was.
Well, I'm glad your experience has been good, and all of our guests so far today have just been spot on. I couldn't be happier.
And I'm a customer now because
I know,
I bought the
thank
printed
you.
out Kurt Vonnegut from the wall over there.
I will let Craig Kennett know that a celebrity bought one of his prints.
I'll be honest with you, I wish we could do every show in an art gallery.
Right.
That would be fun.
It would be.
You'd be like, oh, it's squirrels, shiny objects.
You know what? You should take a picture of my Vonnegut tattoo on my back and show it to him. Yeah.
In the meantime, Stephanie Carpenter and Erin LaBonte join us here. We're supposed to talk about art in the community. Stephanie, I have a feeling you have something to do with this. Hamilton Wood Type and Printing Museum.
I do. This is
Tell us a little bit about the Hamilton Wood Type and Printing Museum here in Two Rivers, Wisconsin.
We have the world's largest collection of wood type in Two Rivers. So that's very exciting. The interesting thing about the museum is we are a working museum. So while there are things under glass, really the idea is that we still make wood type like they did in 1880, and we still print with it. So wood type used to be used for
and people can go there.
People come from all over the world, including Chicago. Yeah, they come. Just this weekend we had a workshop with people.
When did they remove Chicago from the world?
No, actually Europe, because Chicago is like people come up from there more than they do close by. Yeah. So yeah.
How did you get involved with this endeavor?
Yeah, I'm a graphic designer. Okay. And so the really great thing about wood type is it's the history of graphic design. It's the history
really
of how we communicated. And so when I had
it's kind of the history of everything since 1455.
That's exactly right. Gutenberg Bible, yeah. I mean, it completely changed how we talk to each other and how we tell stories.
This is me being
Texting
a geek.
took forever.
But this is me being a geek. But before that, there were maybe 2 or 3 million titles in print. After the Gutenberg Bible, the 50 years before 1500. 20 million volumes were printed, and what really changed the world about that was that for the first time, a lot of those manuscripts weren't being printed in Latin; they were being printed in local languages, and people throw around the term the Reformation a lot, but one of the things that drove the Reformation was the availability of information that Gutenberg and you guys are sort of continuing that in a really fun way, that people can go and see see that classic technology that I'm guessing, this is where my geekdom falls apart here a little bit, but I'm guessing that the wood press didn't change all that substantially from Gutenberg's technology.
No, it's the exact same technology. So the
Yeah.
presses, the machines we use are very similar. It's the same idea, right? Letterpress is taking letters and pressing it into paper
Yeah.
with some ink in between.
Yeah.
And the wood type is your big attention-grabbing headlines. It's your newspaper headlines, it's your posters, it's your billboards. So we have stuff there that are actually the blocks, and we print with them from Ripley's Believe It or Not. So we've got images of
Wow.
mermaids and mind readers, and so it's a really interesting story that it's not just like that old stuff. You know, it's got a good vintage vibe to it.
And it's hand carved.
Hand carved, and actually what we focus on is this idea that Hamilton, there's the Two Rivers history. In 1880, James Edward Hamilton started this wood type factory, and so it's actually a process where you can use a pantograph and do 3 a minute. So there's this idea that there's all this industry behind it, and now it's a craft and an art form. So we still make type like they did in Two Rivers in 1880, 1890.
Which doesn't seem like a great volume, but considering that even before Gutenberg, you know, there were scribes that were sitting at a table and scribing each book.
Yes.
Or each codex, and that's how it happened in Gutenberg. And then those are substantial leaps forward in how we get information. It's
and it completely
the
now
Google of its day.
it totally changed how we communicated then, and now it's an art form.
Yeah.
So we have people who come from all over the world to letterpress print. Some people who have never done it before, and they just want to be creative and artistic. And so we have ink and drinks, like on certain Friday nights, where I know Darla has participated in one.
I had a blast, and my husband did too, and he was so artsy. I've never seen my husband artsy before.
Yes.
So, but it was fantastic. I think I just embarrassed him too.
Yeah.
All right.
You gave a double down.
Yeah.
But I did tell Bill about the ink and drink, and I would love for him and Anna to come up here
Yes.
in order to do that one of these months.
Oh, we're definitely going to do
Okay.
that.
Yeah.
I'd probably be covered with ink by the end of the night. But
That's right. Just
That's
wear your
right.
Lion
That's
King
exactly
t-shirt. the one that you don't care if you get ink on.
just find me passed out on one of the print presses with lettering all over me.
Big L.
Erin LaBonte, let me ask you this.
Erin LaBonte.
What do you know that I can throw out some obscure geeky reference about?
Oh my
Or bit
goodness,
of
I have no
information.
idea.
No,
I'm
I'm
not
kidding.
really sure where to start.
Introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about you.
I'm Erin LaBonte. I'm an associate professor at a small liberal arts college in Manitowoc, which is just down the street from Two Rivers.
Uh-huh.
I also am co-founder of a gallery in Algoma, which is just north of Two Rivers.
Right.
So
I'm familiar with Algoma.
yeah, so I'm invested in this coast as well, and I think I am brought here because I'm kind of a mover and shaker in the public arts realm of this area. So.
Why do you feel it's important to a community? We've had the conversation about how important the arts are to a community, and I would submit, and when we were talking with Greg and Kurt, I would submit that in the current economic climate, that arts might be the one thing that anchors or that builds a unique character to a place like Two Rivers or Algoma or Manitowoc.
Yeah, and on Friday actually I was sitting down with a director from the Wisconsin Arts and also with a community development specialist from Milwaukee, and we were kind of having that conversation, and it's interesting because the arts are so good for the economy and for building
Indeed,
up
they are.
and for building up a community, but also they're so good for everybody that lives in the community. And I think that, you know, so much of art is connected to tourism now, but really having good cultural foundation and having the community engaged in the arts for those people that live there is really
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So.
But and you're right about the amount of money that's generated.
Absolutely,
We've done through theater. We've done some cost studies, and the amount of, just in Evanston, which is just north of Chicago, the amount of money that's generated by a small theater business, Northwestern and Piven Theater and our friends over at Second Act. Turns out to be about $3.5 to $4 million a year, and that's for Valley Parking. That's the art that's generated, the jobs that are generated by that. That's local restaurants and shops, coffee shops. There's a substantial economic benefit to the arts.
And that's what Ann Katz from Wisconsin Arts was sharing, that it actually, the revenue from cultural foundations and from the arts is more than beer in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, sure.
it's got
Sure.
a big impact on who we
Who
are.
the
Yeah.
Do you have some of those numbers?
I don't on me. She had gone over them on Friday. We had an art celebration in Manitowoc for our second annual art slam, which is like the community all hands on event. And she came in and was kind of our keynote speaker on Friday, and she was sharing some of that information, and it was just really reinforcing, I think, a lot of the conversations that are already happening around the arts. Yeah.
And if you could, I would love to connect and share some of those numbers with us.
Absolutely.
Because it just helps, having those numbers helps us make our argument when we talk about it. We've talked a lot about, and we've pulled the numbers. Yeah, we pulled the numbers on art therapy dealing with issues of cycles of violence and recidivism, and the amount of money that's saved by taxpayers by not having by building a skill with somebody or having a young person identify issues, emotional issues that they're going through, to help them refocus so that they don't end up back in jail, or they don't end up breaking the law, or they can build a skill or find a job. There's a substantial cost savings to the taxpayer that's generated by the arts, and typically, just for art therapy, the cost benefit is 10 to 1 on the low end, and is probably substantially higher than that.
Yeah, it's definitely important and validating work. And I think, as part of the conversation too about, building community and wanting young people to stay in your community, visual art, and I have been focusing specifically on murals a lot in my time in Manitowoc, Two Rivers area. It builds ownership.
It does. It really does.
It's so visible. It's kind of easy to do. I don't want to say it's so easy to do, but it's approachable. And one thing that we did last weekend, which was a real hit, was we had our second paint by number mural in Manitowoc.
Oh, how fun!
So people of all ages are out actually putting the paint on the wall and being part of that.
Yeah.
And then I was just down touching up the mural yesterday, and people are checking down and coming by with friends and showing them the work that was done. And so there's a lot of positivity.
I know the city of Chicago well. We've followed a couple of murals in progress. We're following right now. Our good friend Dorian Sylvain is working on the south side. We've seen neighborhoods transform.
Yeah, I love to visit Pilsen when I'm in Chicago. That's my favorite.
Yeah.
Just amazing visual art all over. Yep.
It's absolutely brilliant. But we've seen neighbors that never talked to one another before are now out in lawn chairs, or bringing up drinks for the muralists, or bringing pizzas, and it really becomes this community event. There's now the neighborhood or the community has something of pride to talk about with the mural. Emotionally, there's a transformation.
I feel like art brings hope. It gives hope.
Hey, we've got much more shows. Stick around. We're storming through this show here. We've got much more shows. Stick around. We'll be right back after this. I thought you would like this. This is Pudge from Appleton.
I do like it.
It's a great band.
And I love my home set.
We should. I know.
Thank you.
Well, you can tell on it yourself.
I'm going to tell on myself. Oh no, I love my home set.
Yeah. Happy birthday. We have a cake for you, by the way, paisley cake.
Uh-oh.
But I spelled your name wrong when I was doing all this stuff. So it's got Kerri.
That's beautiful. I love it.
We'll take a picture. Hey, welcome back to the show. We're about to wrap this up here in Two Rivers, Wisconsin. We're hanging out with the great folks at Basil Ishkabibble. You guys got to come up here. You gotta make, I'm not talking to you, I'm talking to the
Okay,
audience.
good, because I was like, I'm right here.
Look
What
at
are you
me
talking
like
about?
That's what I have to deal with after, my God. And I keep threatening to go union, but I can't get her to sign off on it. She keeps threatening to shut this thing down. Anyways, you know what? I'm not gonna belabor the point here because we're running out of time. We got important guests. Greg Buckley loved this. City manager Greg Buckley loved this show so much he came back twice.
I came back. They tried to not let me in at the door, but I came in through the back.
Did they charge you?
And we're also joined by Patrick
Hands
Dewane, the accidental hero. There's a pretty substantial Czech connection to this town, I'm learning. And you visited Domažlice?
Correct, Domažlice, absolutely. And it's through my grandfather. My grandfather lived in Two Rivers. I knew he was in World War II. We'd visit all the time, all of his war memorabilia. Grandpa wasn't talking. Tell me a war story, never. Change the subject, you don't want to hear about that. I was a pallbearer at his funeral here in Philadelphia, here in Two Rivers.
Yeah.
And I thought we buried his stories with him. 20 years later, my sister found his writings that nobody knew about in my aunt's basement and movies, 8mm film that he shot in World War II.
Really?
And it was this extraordinary story. And it's out of a storybook. It's like Luke Skywalker. It's like Harry Potter. My grandfather spoke fluent Czech. He grew up on a farm where all they spoke was Czech. It was his first language. Learned English and then ends up being a lieutenant colonel in World War II. And is given at the end of the war the job, because he spoke fluent Czech, to lead the advance party to liberate Czechoslovakia.
Wow.
Goes with 500 men to the Czech-German border, and he gets there and sees that the closest villages to where they were towns that his grandparents talked about. In fact, they were where his grandparents came from.
Wow.
So he decides he's just going to sneak across the border to see what it's like, and he ends up stumbling across a meeting of the local resistance in his grandmother's hometown. They can't believe that a guy with a name that they all know, it's a local name, right, and is speaking their language and using words that only their region uses, is there. So they call him, we're being liberated by one of our own, and one thing leads to another. 2 days later, he gets to the town of Domažlice, and they are waiting for him with banners, and they find him, and they pick him up, put him on their shoulders, and parade him around town, saying, "We are liberated by one of our own." The
world is truly a small place.
Right.
And the unusual thing about this is that he grew up sort of with a stigma about where he was from, right? On a farm, they'd be called dumb bohunks. That was the slur. You know, Chicago is a Czech town.
Yes.
The previous guest just talked about,
Yeah.
I love Pilsen. Pilsen is a city.
Yeah.
It's right near Domažlice.
Pilsen. Yeah.
Pilsen, right. Most of the Czechs here in Wisconsin came through Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And then they had to decide, city mouse or country mouse, right? George Hallis's two parents were both from the city of Pilsen in what's now the Czech Republic.
I didn't know that.
And many of the Czechs around here came from Domažlice, which is just south of Pilsen. So the thing about my grandfather is that he's got this stigma, right? And he wants to become a real American, whatever that was. And then at the end of the war, in his pursuit, like a lot of immigrants or sons and daughters of immigrants, through the military, he's being carried on the shoulders, and he's seeing the truth. He's seeing the truth about who he was. That he's from this place of cathedrals and castles and flowing beer and beautiful women and gorgeous flowers everywhere. The lilacs are in bloom. It's May the 5th. He's being carried
I've been through the Czech Republic a couple times. It's a beautiful country.
It's gorgeous. So one thing leads to another. I know that we're sort of pressed on time, and Greg over here came with me this last May. May the 5th, every year I do this one-man show I've created about my grandfather in Domažlice. I do it in Prague, I do it in Pilsen, and Two Rivers and Domažlice became sister cities because of me bringing this show every year to Domažlice. The mayor said, Patrick, my Two Rivers want to become sister cities. And I said, Mayor Mach, let me find out. And then thank God, Greg and Brenda Kaprowski and a whole crew of other people said, yes, let's make this happen. Let's do it.
It was amazing. In 2018, we had our first visit from a contingent from Domažlice, dedicated a plaque, Nat Conop's grandkids, including Patrick, donated a plaque identical to the one that's in the town square in Domaschlitze. It's on the front of our city hall, and the whole relationship is just magic. We had 13 folks that did a return visit on the anniversary of Liberation. 75th anniversary is coming up this year.
Yeah.
We're at Liberation Day festivities in Pilsen and in the town of Domaschlitze. That historic link is very, very special. We were honored in 2018 to have the general consul from Chicago as our guest here. The name just escaped me. Borek Lysak and his wife Katerina. He recently presented his credentials as the new ambassador from the Czech Republic to Canada. So he's still in the heartland, just in Ottawa instead of in Chicago. But great friendships have been made. We have members of our high school band going with Andy Pagel, our high school band director, in November. They'll be doing a concert with kids from Domaschlitze, but also from its sister cities in Germany and France. And we look forward to welcoming students from Domaschlitze to Two Rivers in May of next year. And really, Patrick and that magic historic connection of his grandfather's service in the war is what has made all of this possible.
And the Accidental Hero is a show.
One-man show, 90
It's a
minutes.
one-man show.
Yeah.
You got to record it anywhere?
Yes.
I want to see.
And I've got, my website is accidentalhero.net.
Okay.
You can look up my grandfather on Wikipedia, Matt Konop, K-O-N-O-P, and there's more information there. It's in Czech Wikipedia. He's an honorary citizen of the Czech Republic now because of this whole story that had been lost in our family, lost with the Czechs, because when the communists took power, they scrubbed clean any mention of the Americans' role in the liberation of Czechoslovakia. So they lost the story. We lost the story.
We sort of have to leave it there.
You're
Right.
right.
I think we got to talk more. That's a great,
You got it.
great story. Hey, that's going to do it for us. I want to thank everybody here in Two Rivers. You guys were awesome. Thank you so much. Everybody. Darla, you guys were all magic. Greg, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Come back.
You guys are fantastic. We'll definitely come back. Kerri, get us home.
Remember, always make time to play.
Can I do this now? Hey, welcome back to the show. This is sort of the after show that you guys are going to run on Two Rivers Talks.
We are. We hope to be able to get it up once.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Once Darla's had a chance to do some editing work, editing magic.
Just once we left off, we were talking with Patrick Dewane and Greg Buckley. We were talking about your dad in the Second World War. Your grandfather. I'm sorry, your grandfather during the Second World War, and liberating a Czech town that it turns out that his family was from.
Right.
And then it's kind of come full circle here. But you're doing a show, a one-man show called The Accidental Hero.
Correct. Yes.
Run us through one more time the premise behind Accidental Hero. Give people an idea of what the show is about.
Yeah, the accidental part of it is that my grandfather was in the war just to do his job.
Yeah,
And he was responsible for the command post, right, which is near the rear. It's not up on the front.
Right.
But in the Battle of the Bulge, he found himself on the front. He and a band of cooks and drivers had to hold off an SS Panzer tank platoon. His defense platoon had been reassigned. So Grandpa had this knack for being.
And he was in the second infantry division.
Second infantry division,
which
right.
which took it on the chin at the beginning of the Battle of the Bulge.
The Indian Heads, yes. And he then, at the end of the war, again found himself thrust into the front, the leader of the advance guard going into Czechoslovakia, because he spoke Czech. He spoke Czech on a farm 9 miles from here in Stangleville, Wisconsin. They only spoke Czech. He didn't learn English until he went to grade school, and it was his mother tongue. His grandparents, who grew up in these villages he liberated, would hold him and talk baby talk to him in Czech, right? This is the language that he is hearing as he's growing up. And then he is pursuing the American dream, ends up, like a lot, in the army to prove his patriotism and to advance, right? To keep going up the ladder of the American dream. And then it's like, stop, soldier, you know, whatever it is that's guiding this whole thing. Stop, soldier, we've got some important information for you. We're going to show you who you are.
Yeah.
This thing that you think you need to run away from to become this great thing you want to be. No, we're going to show you the truth.
Now, there was no intention by the Army. Your grandfather was from Domoshlice.
No, he was from Stangleville, and then he lived here in Two Rivers.
Okay.
His grandparents came from the Domoshlice area.
Okay.
All four of them, and then immigrated 10 miles from here.
But it was just happenstance.
Just happenstance.
That he ended up there in the war.
Right. Yes. It's the Luke Skywalker story. That's the hero part of it. You know, the Joseph Campbell hero's journey. Where you're sent out off on the journey, and you think it's about this, and then it's like, no. Luke's fighting in the war, and then he finds out this piece.
Yeah.
You know, who his father was, why he has these powers. It's Harry Potter, right? Harry doesn't understand why he has a goofy thing on his forehead. It makes him different. He hates it. You know, my grandfather didn't like that he spoke with an accent. He tried to scrub it out. He got captured twice by the U.S. Army because of the way that he spoke.
Right.
They thought that he had to be German because of the way he spoke. And he had the wrong password. I mean, he's a little bit of a Forrest Gump in addition to Luke Skywalker.
Oh, that's great.
But the Harry Potter thing, he doesn't understand this, right? And my grandfather's mark was his accent and this whole piece of who he was that he didn't know, right? And Two Rivers is full of these stories, right? A lot of Poles, a lot of French Canadians, all these stories to come here to pursue this dream of becoming something. But where did you come from? If you don't know something about where you came from, how do you know who you are, right?
Yeah. No, that's and you said you found writings from your grandfather about what he experienced during the war.
And film.
And film, right.
Film that he had taken?
Yeah.
Film that he had taken.
Wow.
A wind up 8mm Kodak movie camera.
Are those films available for anyone to see?
Yes. Digitized. My uncle Jack digitized them, and I incorporate some of his film footage in the show that I do, and then have made it available. There's a copy of it in the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., and a few other archives that have wanted them.
Yeah.
So it's keeping this story alive. Yeah.
It's a great story. Did you? What was your? But we were talking earlier about branding and branding, how to brand a town. That gets you halfway there.
It does.
That's a hell of a story.
Amazing people come from these small, modest communities.
Yeah.
Just beneath the surface, there's that history. Sometimes lost to the ages. Other times, by happenstance or some kind of intervention, we become aware of them.
It seems like the town has taken your story to a far greater level than most towns might have. It might have ended up in a historical society or a newspaper article. This town has taken a lot farther.
And having it laid out by the time we as a community committed to the sister city relationship, not every community has a one-man stage show that tells the story. And Matt Connick wasn't a young man, he was in the middle of his life.
38 years old. 38-year-old father of 3. That's right, Craig. Yeah.
2 more to come.
When he ended up in the Army.
When he ended up in the Army. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, he was in the CCC. He was a commander in northern Wisconsin of a work camp, Civilian Conservation Corps.
Yeah.
And he was in the Army Reserves. So they called him up. Well, they actually gave him a choice. Either you join full-time in the Army or you're going to lose your position in the Reserves. And he thought, well, my government has funded my family through the Depression. I guess this is my duty. That's, again, the accidental part, right? He wasn't planning on becoming a hero. And all of us are an accidental hero, whether it's taking care of a sick family member and there's always the thought, God, there's got to be somebody better than me to do this job.
Right.
But it's really interesting how fate has these components of impossibility, where when you look back at something in retrospect and you think that should never have happened.
Right.
And it sounds like your grandfather being 38 years old should have precluded him from being on the front lines, from being in the Army in the Second World War, when really the median age for most soldiers, including a lot of officers, was far younger than 38.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's really at the high end, and then to have him in a position where he ends up in an ancestral town is
Crazy.
stunning. It's crazy.
Yeah, no, I couldn't believe it. And I'm reading this, and then I thought, did this really happen? So I started researching it, and I didn't know anything about Czech history. So I ended up then being in correspondence with an expert on this in New Jersey through the internet. And then I got a package from him one day, and I opened it up, and then there was a picture of my grandfather being carried on the shoulders of the people of Domaschlitz. It's now in bronze, 2 blocks from here.
Yeah.
Friggin' City Hall, right?
And
it's like, oh my God, this really
I went by
happened.
that bronze, and I didn't take a close look at it. I'm gonna make sure that I do that when I leave here today, and take a closer look. That's brilliant.
Cool, thank you.
That's brilliant. Greg, the town's invested a lot in this story.
Sure. Well, and we're approaching the 75th anniversary of the liberation of the Czech Republic, the end of World War II. Next year, 75 years.
Yeah.
And it's a good reminder of what, and certainly last year being able to travel to Domaschlitz, the Liberation Day celebrations in Pilsen, it really reminds us of the special role that America has been called to play in the world, and the reverence, the absolute reverence for what our country has represented historically. We lose track of that sometimes. I don't think we're too busy fighting with each other over issues, it seems. But we sure were great in World War II, World War I, and other times when the world needed us. And diplomacy, it wasn't FDR, it wasn't Churchill and Stalin that were on the front lines. It was farm boys from Stangleville, and women that worked in the factories for Hamilton here in Two Rivers. Those are the folks that carry out foreign policy and all of our momentous historic events.
Indeed, and I think it really underscores that immigrant heritage that 99.9% of us in this country.
Yes,
that's where we came from.
Yes, and to roll into town in the Ruska building, commemorating Matt Conop's mother's family. Amazing.
What Greg's talking about is that my grandfather parked his Jeep in the main square of Domaschlitz, got out, looked up, and the building that he parked in front of had his grandmother's name on it. His grandmother's main name, Ruska. Still does.
Wow.
Still does. And that is where the plaque is, in Domaschlitz.
Yeah. Now they've got a bronze of your grandfather being
That
carried.
was the first one, yeah.
You've got it here.
Yes.
They have a bronze over there of maybe a Czech citizen being carried down the street of Main Street here.
Terrific.
It's just,
We'll have to work,
you don't have to answer that.
I think Kamil might like that. We've got some candidates.
Maybe a Czech national being carried out of Phil in the Shell.
or Kurtz's. My grandfather had his own seat over at Kurtz's. That was his place to go to play cards. Jim Christensen's, he knew him, and his father knew him.
Yeah.
I knew the word Kurtz's when I was a little kid.
How long has Kurtz's been there?
100 years?
Gotta be, Jim.
In that same
The
building?
recently retired owner is 4th generation.
Yeah, saw him this morning at breakfast.
Yeah.
Okay.
What he said to me, he came on, we had sort of a trip that happened before this, and he said, I want to tell you, that Sister Cities trip that we were on, he said, that was one of the highlights of my life.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I said, well, me too, brother.
So 90-minute one-man show.
Yeah.
Are you performing anywhere currently? Are you bringing back the show anytime soon?
I will be bringing it back to the Lakeshore on April 26th at the Capitol Theater in Manitowoc.
Yeah.
So I will be doing it there right before then, the trip, and I'm hoping there might be a delegation from Two Rivers going. So it'll be right before I go to the Czech Republic, so here on the Lakeshore. And then I will be flying to New York to do the show on May the 8th, the end of the war, 75th anniversary, at the National Czech Center on East 73rd Street in Manhattan.
Wow.
Oh, cool.
All right.
Yeah,
That's a hell of an ambassador.
Indeed. And things have come full circle, and Patrick has a second home here in Two Rivers on our little Riviera over near Neshota Beach.
I'm right on the beach, and it's an Airbnb, and I had a string. There was this woman from Australia who was there, this couple from Germany who were in Chicago for a wedding, and then they're cruising Airbnb and they find it. And then there was a guy from the UK who was here with his wife and his 2-year-old, so he could go to Lambeau Field for his first NFL game. He saw the Packers beat the Vikings.
Oh, wow.
That's great. That's awesome.
So it's I thought it was going to be mainly people from Chicago and Wisconsin, but it's been from all over. And I think that it's a real net positive to Rivers. That these are people who otherwise might not find it, but through the the pop-o-matic of Airbnb, like, oh, where am I going here? That then they end up here.
It's and especially coming out of a war. I know, having been through a war, that there are some astounding stories that just never get told, and then they get forgotten after a while and lost, or people don't write things down and they pass away or they move away, or the memory fades or what have you. And that's what I think is so important about the show that you're doing, is all too often we lose those shows. And what Greg was talking about all the important lessons and aspects of and importance about the show, that all comes together in the Accidental Hero, and it's an important narrative that we can't lose, that we need to protect, and you're doing it.
Yeah, his story is a fill-in for the millions of other soldiers' tales that we don't know or we never hear. Also, when I do the show in a small town, they get him. They get my grandfather because he's this small town guy, like the guy they used to see in the diner wearing the seed cap.
Yeah.
And you think he's just this ordinary guy, and it's like, except he lived a Greek epic, right?
Right.
For those people who can't see the show live, is there any place you can go
online? You can Google it, Accidental Hero. You can go to my website, accidentalhero.net, or you can get in touch with me, and my
You'll just come to their house and do it for them?
Accidental Hero, then the number 1 @gmail, and then I can send it. I sell DVDs.
Any plans on doing a book about the story? Seems like it'd be a phenomenal.
Boy, I'm glad you asked that question. There is a writer in the Czech Republic I'm working with who is writing a book from the Czech perspective in Czech about my grandfather, and then there is a producer, an award-winning producer who has bought the movie rights to it. He just spent 4 days at my Airbnb to get the feel for Two Rivers.
Really?
And they took him to Mahoots, and he's walking up and down Washington like you guys were, right? Getting the full Two Rivers experience. So he came on for part of the trip this last May. So Christopher is intending to make a feature film out of it.
Wow.
Right. You'll keep us informed.
Yeah, I'm writing a Two Rivers guidebook, so
wonderful.
I'm soaking in all this.
Yeah, that's very good.
There you go.
Another tool for marketing. All right.
See, you people working for you, man.
That's right. Believers.
You just sit back and let them go.
Right. We'll just let it happen.
Greg Buckley, thank you very much. Thank you for the hospitality. Yes. It's really
Come
wonderful.
visit us again.
Oh, and
spread the word.
It's absolutely will. But the hospitality was great. We loved being here. It was just wonderful, and thank you.
Thank you. So, thank you to Basil Ishkabibble.
Patrick Dewane, the accidental tourist, brother.
Hero.
It's a great story.
Yeah,
it's a great story.
It still blows me away.
Yeah.
Every time.
I'm blown away. I can't wait to find out more.
Yeah.
So I'll get those links from you, and then we'll share them with our audience too.
Sounds great.
It was fantastic. All right, welcome back to the show. I'm Darla LeClaire. Todd Nelson sitting next to me. We're also.
This is Bill Kerri.
And you know what? That's the best he's ever looked.
You have to stuff something way bigger than
This is what you get after 3.5 hours of broadcast.
By the way, she didn't know that I was also a Playmate at one time.
Were you?
I'm sure I played her earlier. I've been that for 53 consecutive years.
Even
Play
Play
nerd?
nerd.
How about play just nerd?
Play, that too.
Okay,
So, you open the doors to Basil Ishkabible's art gallery and artist share space to us. And we couldn't thank you more. It was just, we felt like we were home. So, among great people. And so, from Kerri and I just wanted to say thank you. And after we leave here today, you're closing the doors and never, no, you're not. You've got much to go down.
this is why I give him so much
Right.
crap.
Well, I
I'm
thought,
glad you do.
it was my assumption that whenever I leave a place, it doesn't exist
Oh, it
anymore.
doesn't exist anymore, oh.
That actually happens to me a lot. I have stories.
Yeah?
Yeah.
All right. We'll talk. No, but you've always got something going on here at Basil Ishkabibble, and what we want to know what's coming up next.
Well, in the past few months, we've had a number of different things happening here. I had noticed something online, a program on YouTube that I found, and it was called Portrait Artist of the Year. It's something they go over to the UK, and I thought, we can tone this down into more something that fits in here.
Yeah.
And we brought in a friend of ours who is a musician in town here.
Mhm.
I'll say his name. I don't think he'll care. His name's Lee Noodleman, and I call him Noodles. But we had him come in. We have a chair back here. He sat in. He disappeared into it because he's a very small man. But we gave the artists each a canvas to work with, and you had 4 hours to do a portrait. We had a break in between. You don't want the poor man to be sitting there all day.
Sure.
Give him an hour rest in between. We had a 2-hour session in the morning, 2 hours in the afternoon, and then at the end of it, they had Darla invited some judges to come in and judge the program afterwards, and a new artist to the gallery, Lynette, and she did a phenomenal job.
Right, and that was Sonia,
What was
No,
her,
Vasquez.
what was her medium?
she did
Wait.
oil.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
which was amazing.
Yeah.
I thought for sure she would do acrylic, or that I
Right.
assumed everyone would do watercolor or acrylic or maybe chalk or
Right.
just and she did
She did
oil.
oils, and hers was awesome.
And she did really, really well. But Mr. Noodleman had a lot of character to him. He's a musician. He reminds me of someone that you would see who is like in the Rolling Stones. And just his vibe and his dress and all that.
Making soup.
Huh?
Don't you, see?
He's goofy. He's
See,
getting
you
a
guys
little
just
giddy
thought I
now.
was a brat, but no, this is why.
It's the cake pie that's kicking in, right? Okay.
It's gonna serve me well on the way home.
But Mr. Noodleman was very amenable, and he was a great subject for everyone to try and capture, and it was a great day. But that all stemmed out of a YouTube thing that he happened to see online.
Sparked an
But
idea, yeah.
we called it Spit and Image, a portrait challenge.
Oh, that's
I love
great,
that, yeah.
great.
Yeah.
And we will be doing
It's
that.
fun. We
again.
left the gallery open
Sure
so people
is.
could come through and just see what we were doing.
I'm astounded how many artists overlook the importance of portraiture. Obviously so many styles, but it's far better than photography. And I think it's even more interesting than almost any other genre of film or of art.
Well, let's
because
peek
it's
into
such
the
a-
artist himself.
Because there's such an intimate connection between the human face and the
Right.
observer.
And I love when each artist has just such a different, unique style, and
Yeah,
you see
like
each
Modigliani.
one and of the same
It was
person, they're
amazing.
so
Yeah.
completely different.
Oh yeah, it was amazing
Yeah.
what everyone thought. And I had the privilege, because I am not an artist. I write and I make short films, but I cannot draw, I cannot paint. But I had the privilege to be able to walk around and look at at their work and their
Yeah.
progress, and it was fascinating.
Yeah.
It was just fascinating. So we did that. We just had it here in Two Rivers last weekend, our annual Ethnic Fest.
Mhm.
And he set up down by the encore stage. And so basically it was kind of like challenge,
Yeah.
these acts are only on for maybe 50, 60 minutes. It's like, capture the essence,
Right,
you
right.
know, and he got to a certain point.
Well, I wanna further the painting, both of the
Finish them
paintings.
up, yeah.
And I thought, nah, this isn't gonna be something I wanna do quickly, so I'm gonna take my time on both of them. One is gonna be a portrait of one of the bands was the Sheboygan Ukulele Band. They were awesome.
Yeah.
They played all rock and roll standards, but it was all ukulele music.
They have around 35, 40 people who are in the Sheboygan Ukulele Club. They had, I think, 16 ukuleles on stage.
Oh, wow.
And it was
And
so
one
cool.
accordion.
And one accordion. So that was, again, I mean, it really captures the eye,
Mhm.
you know, and then the other
group
act-
that I dealt with was Mexican dancers and real
Well, that was
ornate.
folklorico.
Yeah, and that was a
Nacional.
real ornate regalia. So
Wow.
this will be a good one to do.
Oh, yeah, they
So you
started off.
you guys are doing much more for this community than just having wall
They're
space.
providing walls.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right.
And I have something
Really
clearly-
reflecting a much deeper, much more intricate.
Yeah, well,
and
mine is
intricate
kind of cornball,
community.
the next one coming up, but I think it's just kind of a fun thing for the deer and the beer,
For hunting
or the
widows.
hunting widows.
So, and welcome back to Two Rivers Talks. We're wrapping up the day here today. It's been a special day with Bill Turk and Carrie Kendall from WCGO down in Chicago.
What an amazing day.
Oh
right?
my goodness
This is
gracious.
Carrie, by the way, in case-
This is Carrie.
in case people weren't sure.
Don't know
She's
who's
the
there.
pretty one. Bill's
Thank
all
you.
right.
Everyone always says Bill's the pretty one. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Uh,
Well, everybody must be blind.
I'm pretty in a dark room.
Yeah. So anyway, but we want to just say thank you very much for coming up today.
Thank you.
And it's been tremendous, and we're kind of curious as to what your backstory is and how you discovered us and how our relationship got started. But I'd like to know how your relationship got started first.
Should I?
Go ahead.
Carrie and I were born Siamese twins.
I knew it.
It's pretty obvious. Sadly, when they separated us, all the looks went to her. No, it's really interesting. We've known each other now exactly for 26 months. And we were introduced by someone else who helped us put together the show. And then it just became Playtime with Bill Kerri and Carrie Kendall. The introduction was really sort of odd and strange, because I had to go home ultimately and tell my wife that I would be working with a Playboy Playmate.
And you were Playmate of the Month in 1990.
Not
What
where it
month was
is.
My birthday month, September. I just
Oh.
lucked
Now,
out, yeah.
how come you didn't give her a hard time when I said Carrie was?
Because she said it correctly. She didn't say
Oh,
former
did she?
playmate. Yeah.
Okay.
She said you were Playmate of the Month in September of 1990.
That's right.
absolutely true. But I'm
Okay.
not a former Playmate. Once a Playmate, always a Playmate.
Always a Playmate.
It's
a
kind of like
Marine.
me. I was in the U.S. Army. Once a soldier, always a soldier.
Thank
You don't give that up. If I had ever
Yeah.
been a Playmate,
Yeah.
I would forever be a
Although-
Playmate.
Well, I mean,
Although I will point out significantly different fashion choices.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, whatever.
She was more
I did
airy.
paintball and I was on the bikini team, so.
I was low crawling
At the
through
end
the
of the long
mud.
day.
Yeah, I wish I had
It's
had
gone,
her
it's
life.
gone on a dark road. No, but that was really sort of the truth of it was, Carrie and I were introduced, we met at a Starbucks and had a conversation. Ultimately, what we had a conversation about was that this project needed to be a safe space, for everybody. So that we needed, the most important thing was the mutual respect and the friendship, and that it'd be nurturing and protective for each person, so that we could come to this freely, we could do what we needed to do, and not be carrying any extra baggage.
Right, and Bill even suggested, well, maybe we don't even mention that you're a Playboy Playmate, and I said, oh no, because the way society works is that someone will think they've uncovered a huge
Oh.
story, We have to put that out there
Yeah.
right away, put it on the table, we all know, so someone doesn't think that
Oh, that they
they're
discovered
putting out the
it.
huge story,
Right,
yeah,
right.
and, yeah.
I think it's
So-
awesome.
I think,
I think, because not everybody has the opportunity to do that.
no, only
Yeah.
12
Yeah.
here are paid, that's why we're so, we are kind of a-holes about it, we playmates, we're not former playmates, we're not bunnies, there's only 12 of us a year.
Right.
And from
It's
thousands
special.
of girls who submit themselves.
And here's the thing, to bring this into an arts perspective, every art student has either posed nude or has drawn a nude.
Right,
And then that's one of the most popular genres in art is the nude. It's the exploration of the nude.
oh, we're so hypocritical about it all.
We are terribly hypocritical.
You know, it's like violence porn, but no, don't show a nipple, you
Right.
know?
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah, you can see
Yeah.
violence galore on
Yeah.
TV or in
You
movies.
can go to the grocery store and Guns and Ammo magazine is out front, but Cosmopolitan?
Well, but the funny thing is, I'll tell you, the base, my fan base is mostly conservative, Republican, NRA people. Yeah, it's not the liberals, that's who the fan base is,
Yeah.
you know, but I guess they're hush-hush about it or something, I don't know, it's really weird, it's very confusing.
But it's something to celebrate.
Absolutely.
It absolutely is.
We're very backwards compared to like Europe,
Right.
you know, and maybe eventually we will
Where everybody
evolve,
poses nude.
you know.
They're at the mall naked.
Let's just
From the beaches.
drop trout and let's go shopping. I don't know. You know, but one thing I wanted to say about your show is that we all have our own specific ideas as to what's happening in our country and what
Yeah.
should happen with different issues and all that. But you know, and we're not going to agree on everything. But you know what? There is so much common ground, and that's the one thing that I noticed with your show. You find that common ground that is between everybody. It doesn't matter, you know, what their existential beliefs are.
Like Kerri said,
So it's
so much
important.
of her fan base is skews conservative.
Right.
The station, a lot of the programming skews conservative. But we've had Bill Ayers as a friend of the show, who's Satan according to Fox News. You know, but we've also had political candidates who are Republican.
We've had both a Democrat and Republican political candidate
Okay.
candidates on our show.
Indeed.
That's wonderful.
And we can have that conversation because we sort of exist in this no man's land of the arts where endemic to the arts are substantive conversations about life and all the issues that we face. But we don't. When I told Bill Ayers, he was talking about a new book on education that he wrote. He's an educator, first and foremost. And I said, Bill, here's the deal, because it started to get a little partisan. And I said, here's the deal. We have friends on both sides of the aisle who listen to the show, and I want you to make that case to our friends on the right, because they need to understand, or they need to be a part of this conversation.
Absolutely, and that's what we wanna do, we wanna create and build the conversations, not control the conversations.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think you do a really fantastic job.
And everybody that comes into that studio is family
Absolutely.
to us, and we want them, regardless of where they come from, we want them to come in there and then leave feeling empowered, feeling that they've been they're acknowledged and that they're valued.
I think that's one of the things that we share between what we try to do on Two Rivers Talks and
Yeah.
your show together. One of the reasons we kind of had that nice connection with each other, and you guys and Darla hit it off right away. I'm sad. This is the first time I've had a chance to talk to you guys directly, but I know I tried to get down to the last time that Darla was down for the show.
Yeah.
But
Well, whatever, you're not welcome anymore, so.
well, I know I just allowed now. So, you know. But I wanted to come back for a second to the Two Rivers connection. When you found out about Darla and sort of the art gallery, what is it that attracted you to Two Rivers as a story?
The first thing that attracted me, first of all, was Basil Ishkabibble. It's a great
It's just a cool
name.
name, right?
It's just an awesome name. But the other thing, then after I had a chance to connect with Darla a little bit, and what she was saying about what the gallery was trying to achieve, or what they were trying to achieve, and the connections to the community, that's right in our wheelhouse.
Mhm.
That's exactly what we want to champion. We could just say, and this band is playing here, and this theater is, but, you know, we could just showcase, you know, acts all day long.
Right, we're not an entertainment guide, we're
Yeah,
trying to create
yeah.
community through art, bringing
Precisely.
people together and starting conversations like we were saying before, through art,
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
and that's what you're doing.
Yeah, and then,
You know,
you know, and building on that with, when we started Two Rivers Talks, you know, like we've had Senator Jacques on, and we interviewed him. He was the representative for our area, now it's Shay Sortwell, and we had him on. And actually,
Can we guilt trip your governor for not showing up today though?
nope, you wanna know why? Because it looks like he's gonna be up here the week of October 21st.
He's gonna,
Sorry.
he missed us.
It looks like that's when it'll fit, but
Okay.
but your suggestion it planted the seed for us to get Governor Evers up to Two Rivers.
Excellent.
And to be on our show.
Excellent.
Nothing's written in stone yet, but it sure is looking good according to the conversation I've been
Because
having
this
with
is the
Zane.
narrative, and that's why he needs to show up, because this changes the old narrative. This changes the stoicism and the lethargy that's, you know, the sort of, well, you know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Well, it's broke. So what are you gonna do to fix it? You can't just let it
Right,
heal itself, because it won't.
right.
You have to do something proactive. And again, the arts, and we talked with Dan Davies earlier, with his project, Film Forte, or Alex Phillip, who's working, who's autistic, and he's working with other autistic people in film. That's what begins to change the scenario, because I think we've moved beyond the every town is gonna have its own factory kind of thing. If that happens, great. But it seems a lot of that's moved out, and now companies are so focused on the economics of what they do that they skew all of their assets towards large commercial areas, or even large commercial areas that will give them all kinds of tax gifts,
Right,
which little
yeah,
towns just
incentives.
can't compete with.
Right,
So what do you do in that environment to find your individual character and that individual voice? And a lot of times that is the arts. That's unique to this place, and people will come into a gallery like this and they'll look on the walls and they'll see something that inspires or engages them or enlightens them or makes them feel, and they'll buy it and take it home, so that whenever they look at that picture or that sculpture,
right.
they remember this moment and this time, and eating at Kurtz's,
Right.
and, you know,
That's
walking
true.
down the street.
Every piece of art creates a full story.
It does.
Oh, that's when your mom and I were,
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
but you know, and in addition to that, you know, we wanna bring more people down into Two Rivers, and especially in the winter months when there's very little going on. We have events here,
Yeah.
so it gives people in the community something to do and a reason to come downtown.
Indeed.
And if you have a vibrant downtown, and you have people who are entrepreneurial minded, that's kind of where Todd comes in with Two Rivers Biz Starts.
Mhm.
So, I mean, it is a marriage made in heaven, and a marriage of many partners. It's like we're a plural relationship, because you've got the city,
yeah,
you've
yeah.
got TR Biz Starts, you know, you've got us, we're a place to be. And you have entrepreneurial minded people. So, and, you know, I know, like when I ran for city council 3 years ago, one of the things that I was most passionate about was the fact that in our economic development budget, there was only I think it was around $40,000 was earmarked, whereas our Parks and Rec budget was a lot more than that. And I thought, boy, the scales are tilted, you know, because you can't just look at tourism. You also, it's at least a 2, 3, 4 pronged approach.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and now we have a new, what is Elizabeth's, she's the economic, director of
Community
economic.
development director.
Okay.
Right,
So we
right.
now have somebody who's gonna be in the driver's seat for that,
Yeah.
who's gonna be helping Greg Buckley.
So there's much more parity now in sort of what we're trying to
Exactly.
do. And, you know, I think it is, I mean, you know, Darla's gonna probably be too modest to say this, but I think, you know, starting up an art gallery here, this has become a nexus for culture, you know, in the downtown area, and has worked in conjunction with things like the Wood Type Museum and other kinds of artistic efforts. I mean, thanks to some of the stuff that she's done, we've had Art in the Park, this last,
Yeah.
summer, which
Through
was
Main
amazing.
Street,
Like
yeah.
an art competition where people put together original stuff and put up, you know, right in the downtown area where people can enjoy it all summer long into the autumn season. And
So we're talking, Kevin and I were talking yesterday
Yeah.
about a plein air
Yeah.
festival, using crayons.
Yeah,
Oh, that would be cool.
awesome stuff, right? I mean, so like ideas are germinating out of the gallery here and what's been happening and, you know, with the support of Tours Main Street and some of those programs, we're very excited about these things that we've been able to, you know,
Yeah.
raise up these stories
Yeah.
in our community
Yeah.
and help to celebrate, you know, the things that are happening that are reinventing
Mhm.
the city and making it a great place to be.
And just spending a little bit of time here today, you know, it's a 2-hour show, so there's no way we're gonna cover everything. But spending a little bit of time here today, again, that idea of, people don't think of the arts as being important to a community, until they know the depth of that artistic community. And, from Patrick Dewane, and his story about his grandfather, so there's theater, there's music, a couple of the bars here were rocking last night with local bands.
Right.
And then you've got what you're doing here with Basil Ishkabibble, and I was looking at a number of places around town. That's what keeps
Right.
people here.
You know, and the thing that kind of, part of the impetus for wanting to do this too was the fact that, you know, when there have to be, budget cuts in education.
Yeah.
What are some of the first things that go?
Art and music.
Right.
Art and music.
And the thing is that it's already been shown that children who have exposure to the arts and to music, theater,
Indeed.
their SAT scores are higher, they do better in life.
Yeah.
You know, and it's beneficial, and in fact, I'm writing an article right now for the Herald Times Reporter, through, Arts Forward. And it deals with the fact of how, the importance of art in the community,
Yeah.
and I'm focusing on two different things.
Yeah.
I'm focusing on, you know, countries that are currently war-torn,
Mhm.
and that's, art and music is not something that they, you know, if you're, it's more important to make sure you're not getting shot,
Right.
and that you can go out and get something to eat than it is to sit down and paint a painting, you don't have the luxury.
Right.
Right.
Another thing is homelessness, and how homelessness can affect people, because there is a dearth of art, you know, and how that can be very important to help people come out of homelessness.
But I can tell you, art is so fundamental that even being around people that are getting shot at on a constant basis, they're still creating art.
And I have to agree with you, because my Yemeni friend, he has to buy all his supplies on the black market. I'm
Yeah.
very glad to say that through the sale of special order prints that I've been able to do here,
Yeah.
I was able to MoneyGram him $65 American.
Yeah.
And you wanna know what he did with it? He fed his neighborhood.
Wow.
I still get,
This is not, yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
so. but
Art did
there-
that.
Art did that.
Art did that.
Mhm.
Right, and so, but, you know, but it's very difficult, and, you know, we take it for granted. But when it's not around, that's when you notice its absence.
Yeah.
So, but let's enjoy it. I have 38 people on the waiting list,
Yeah.
local people, to be in the gallery. We have such a plethora of talented people. This is a place for them to hopefully shine.
You know, the interesting thing was, during the radio show, we talked with Erin LaBonte from Manitowoc.
Right.
And we were talking about the amount of money that an art community generates for a community, which is one of those, all too often in communities, is one of those under-realized metrics. Until somebody steps out actually goes to businesses and says, hey, you know, there was a show there. Do you have an idea of the number of people that came to your restaurant after the show? You know, when you extrapolate that out, and $7 for an entree, and blah blah blah. That and the gas station, the printing, and all those things
The
that
babysitter, which I hadn't thought about, yeah.
all of those things feed that economic engine, and then when you start looking at that, you realize how substantial
Right.
The arts are from an economic basis. And I can tell you, you're working on that article. The watching community mural projects that bring out young people into the community. Those young people are learning work skills, and for all of the artists in the room here, that when you work on a project, you're not punching a clock. So it maybe you're inspired as hell, and you can do a painting in an hour and a half or 2 hours, but maybe it's taking you a month and a half, and you're certainly not looking for an hourly return when you put that up on the wall. It might be $50, it might be $250, might be $2,500. Depends on the market, but you're not doing it for that. You're doing it because you want to realize that artwork. And when young people do that, they learn some important skills. They learn teamwork and showing up on time, but they also learn the benefit of realizing a project and having that be the ultimate fruit. And if you get paid for it, holy crap!
Right.
So those are really important lessons, particularly for young people.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Did you have any more questions for Kerri and Bill?
I have many, but you guys have a long drive back, right? I mean, it's like 3 hours back down the road.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how grateful we are that you guys came up here and spent some time with our community.
it's our
and getting to
pleasure.
know us.
Wonderful.
And it's good to get to know you guys a little bit. I
Yeah.
hope we get to see you again. Come back anytime to the show, to the city. We're gonna have a nice new hotel here next summer.
All right.
New place.
Could use one of those.
Yeah.
There's a story behind it, but we're not going that way.
Offline.
Yeah.
Oh, boy, he's gonna write on your,
Offline with a
blog
tourist board
page
camper.
about that.
Right. But no, it's been absolutely wonderful. You've gotten to get a little bit of a taste of the city, and there's so many more stories to tell. But if we can ever help.
Oh, we started.
Yeah,
We started.
yeah, I think it definitely is. But thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and that about wraps it up for this episode of Two Rivers Talks.
Can I eat my cake now?
You can eat your cake, yes. It's just been a very special day, and I couldn't be happier. And Todd, I know that you're pretty pleased with the outcome as well.
I'm walking on clouds right now.
Okay,
Yeah.
far out.
And thank you for the birthday cake.
Yeah.
Oh,
Happy birthday.
happy birthday.
I love the cake, it was so good.
Was it? I'm dying to have my teas. All right, so next up, Darla eating cake. So anyway, we will see you on the streets, Two Rivers. Thank you.
Cheers,
Bye-bye.
guys.